Hello and welcome back to the podcast on this incredibly sunny, beautiful day. And I'm just soaking in the sun. I probably should close the blinds because it's probably very, very bright on your end, but I can't. It's too beautiful. It's too um, sunshiny. I don't know. I'm hoping the rays are coming through to you. This is like I can't really see. I'll be honest with you. It's very bright, but it's feeling really good. It's actually a really I don't know, a timely moment because today we're going to talk about, and actually, sometimes I think better when my eyes are closed anyway. Thanks for sticking around. Today we're going to talk about this shift back into femininity and kind of what is going on collectively in the world, what we might feel energetically in our lives right now. And if you're somebody who follows me and is listening to this podcast, you're clearly on some sort of a journey home to self. Maybe you found that through motherhood, maybe you found that through other avenues, but um, I think this is going to be an interesting topic because what we it's just been so present for me recently, and I think it's important that we talk about it because it's one of those things again that we're feeling, but we don't really know what it is and what's happening. It's kind of like bubbling beneath the surface. If that makes sense to you, then if you know, you know. If you know, you know. And I've had the opportunity recently to work with some really beautiful, incredible women. And it's reminded me. So last Sunday, I hosted a retreat. And I didn't really talk about it too much on last week's podcast, but I co hosted a retreat with a local woman here who asked me to help her with it. And it was so beautiful. It was a prenatal day retreat where we kind of met in the woods in this beautiful cabin home and we sank into our bodies and we walked in the forest and we ate great food and we connected and we remembered how to trust our bodies. We remembered what is going on. So I was the only one present in that room that was not pregnant, and it was so, so powerful. And as I was sitting there, one of the most profound things that I realized is that this generation of women, mothers for sure, but this generation of women has the opportunity and seems to be taking the opportunity to do everything differently. We have different opportunities, we have different mindsets, we have different conversations that we're having in this life. And I think those of us who are here as a generation of young women, we're choosing a different path. Whether that means that you have chosen to be more intuitive with your pregnancy, whether that means that you have chosen to reconnect to your body and learn to love your bleed and your menstrual cycle, whether that is the opportunity to really sink into pleasure in an intentional, slow, mindful way that is truly about listening to the body and not what it should be, should look like, could look like, others might want it to look like. And it's not an easy path to walk. And this is something that I mentioned in the workshop that I did. I did a primal pregnancy workshop in that retreat, during that retreat. And it was a really, really powerful moment where it was just this realization and this kind of almost like a channeled message, really. But it was like the work that you are doing, a lot of it is beneath the surface. And the work that you are doing is not easy work because what we're doing is we're interrupting patterns constantly. We are deciding to do life differently. We are learning that we don't have to create a life that everybody else, that our parents wanted for us, that our parents had. We do not have the same opportunities. If you are growing up and sort of at the age where you are having children and buying homes and having careers, we do not have the same landscape as our parents did. It's not as affordable by any means. Financially, it's just not the same. So we are really, not only do we feel this inner urge to do it differently, but a lot of the time, circumstantially, we have to do it differently. We have to change our path. We have to change our narrative because simply the environment doesn't allow the same sort of outcome that our parents and our grandparents maybe had when it comes to just quote unquote lifestyle. But to be a woman, to be a human, to be a young person, a sort of person who's kind of maybe built up the career a little bit, maybe tried to figure out where they fit in this world, maybe is has had a life transition, has had a shift, has had a change, to be a human being who is choosing a different path. It doesn't even have to be a drastically different path, but it is not an easy path to walk. It is hard. And it's not just hard because you might come up against resistance in the external world. It's hard because internally you are struggling to recreate every single belief that you have been given. You are rewriting not just your story, you are writing the next phase of your life. So if you think about, and you talk about like ancestral trauma or breaking patterns that are in your family. And a lot of the times that comes from the mother line. But if you think about this line, so like, let's just take, for instance, you're choosing to have a more intuitive pregnancy, maybe a more intuitive birth, and, or maybe just mother in a more intuitive way, or whatever that means. Maybe that's just like a little bit of, oh, I'm going to just lean into myself a little bit more in whatever the way that means for you. And if you think about this visual, this line of like, okay, here is your great grandmother, here's your grandmother, here's your mother. And it's all kind of, it's obviously changed throughout those generations. Our parents clearly changed some things. Our grandparents changed what happened to them. There's different little movements. But when we talk about like truly learning to trust the self again, here we are, here's this lineage. And then there's you. And it's almost like the, let's just say when I see it, it's like a darker kind of color, maybe like a dark purple or something, or a gray, or whatever that looks like, whatever you see. That's just like, that's the lineage, that's the past. And from here, this is you here. You are now changing not just your stories, but you're changing the stories for your children, for your siblings, for those in your life, for friends, for other family members. You are changing the future of your line. And that is a lot of responsibility. That is a lot of responsibility, and that takes a lot of work to constantly bring this, you and your mind and your heart back to the self in our very external world is a very, very hard thing to do. And it can feel like a burden sometimes. And yes, sometimes it feels really free and it feels amazing and it feels like you're seeing progress and you see the change, but you don't always see it right away. Sometimes it's just a felt feeling that you have to trust, and that's a really hard thing to do. So if you're here, I want to applaud you on that, because it's a real and true thing, and you are the change maker in your family. That is your role. And it's a hard role to take sometimes. So I just want you to know that I see you, I feel you, I recognize you, and it's important. And while we're talking about sort of that stage of things, that sort of underlying feeling of coming back to self, a lot of the things that we're hearing right now too is around returning to divine feminine, moving into a more feminine energy. And that can mean like so many different things. But for me, that really means like true to self. That means intuition. That means a little bit more fluidity. That means maybe it doesn't look so rigid and planned out as maybe our world and our experiences look like when it comes to career, when it comes to finances, when it comes to home. We're kind of in this space where we have the opportunity to create our own reality in a way that we never really have before in history, in the world. And it's a lot of moving parts all at once, because first of all, we're learning how to trust ourselves. We're learning that we can trust ourselves. We are learning to rewrite those stories, and then we're learning how to even go about figuring out how to trust yourself. Like how to actually, what does that mean when you're moving through the world? What does that mean to like trust your intuition? Okay, like give me something practical, right? That's kind of how I like to operate in the world. Like how does this even make sense? First you have to just like sit with it and feel it, but then like what does that look like in the day to day? And I think where you want to start is truly just small things that are going to lead to bigger things. Because a lot of times we feel this, we see change, we want to change, and we want to see it right away. And that's just not how it works, right? Especially in the world that we live in. It takes time for things to come back together. As you start to change patterns and change stories, it takes a minute for things to calibrate and to kind of fall into a new order. And so we have to leave space for that, and that's where this kind of surrender idea comes from of, okay, I trust that it's going to be okay because I trust myself. I may not know all the details. I may not know exactly how it's going to fall into place, but I know that it will. And I don't know when. And in our kind of certainty seeking world, that can be a really hard thing to grapple with and to sit with. And so if we start with small things, we start with like, okay, I'm going to trust that this thing that just happened to me, or this person that just, this separation, for example, I'm going to trust that this is for the best because it happened, and because it feels, in some way, it feels rooted and grounded, even though right in front of me, it feels chaotic and scary and unplanned. Okay. How can I come back to the body? How can I remind myself that I am safe? And a lot of times that's just like interrupting that pattern and like creating a new pattern. Like, so what does that look like? I'm not doing a good job of giving an example, am I? It's about like, once you start to learn how to rewrite your stories, you can then go, okay, this is my story now. This is who I am. This is what I am working towards. And this is who I am at my core. These are the qualities that I am going to move towards. And then in every day, in whatever situation, start small, start once, and just, how do I hold on to these new values, or these values that I want to be forefront now? And how do I move through my life in that way? And it's really, really interesting. Like for me right now, I'm working through a, it's something that I've been working through for years, and it's like annoying that I'm still working through it, but it's obviously, there's something within me that is like, okay, this is still not complete. So let's figure out where this goes. And for me, it's more like a career thing, because in some way, I guess I've always felt a little bit like a black sheep. And I think that was more um, self-induced than it was my external environment. I just haven't always felt like I fit in, like within the family, within the place I grew up, within like, just, I just haven't felt very like I fit into the mold of society. And I wouldn't say that caused me a ton of problems externally, but it internally, it's just been this like cooking. It's like a little pressure cooker. And now I'm at a stage in my life where I'm like, I've kind of been moving in and out between like safe zones and between like jobs and employment, and then freelancing, and then kind of working for myself, and then creating Homecoming. And for some reason, I haven't really taken the full leap. Like I've got one toe in, one toe out. And I'm kind of in that space where I'm like, well, I don't know what it's going to look like. What does that mean? And then I think about like, well, what do I actually want? What does this look like for me? And for me, it looks like it doesn't have to be one thing, right? Like it can be an expression of who I am in a variety of different ways. I'm like, okay, well, I niched into motherhood and pregnancy, but what does that mean? And it's like, well, doesn't have to be motherhood and pregnancy, because the themes are still the same. The themes are still about trusting the self, returning to that primal energy, that primal feminine space, that primal human space of what is natural to us, what feels like we are living in alignment with nature, what is like a way that I can realign with that, because that manifests into every facet of our lives. It doesn't have to just be motherhood. That just happens to be where that really awoke for me, and where that really came into my experience. Was motherhood really ignited that for me. But the themes are still the same, so it's still it applies in every facet of your life, no matter where you are. And so I'm like, why am I still trying to put myself into a box when I know all of this? The I know I have a beautiful community that has been here. I know that I've built something great. I know that this makes me feel good to work into the world. So what am I waiting for? What is this approval that I am still seeking? And I think where I'm trying to go with this is this idea that we get to choose. We get to choose. Like we have that. And even if when we don't feel like we get to choose, we do get to choose, because when you trust your intuition, when you trust your body, when you trust that the environment is going to rise up to support you, when you trust that you are held even when you don't feel the hands holding you from underneath, you know that you are held. That's when we find a safety in the body that we can start to make decisions from. And if you're still being held back by fear, that's okay. You just keep trying, you just keep going, because we don't need to make these drastic decisions right away. Life will fall into order when it's ready to fall into order. When you are at a space where your nervous system feels like it can handle the capacity that you're wanting, we're in this space of like calling in and manifesting and doing all this, but like, what about just being where we are right now? What about just finding safety in what is right now and letting the body feel like, oh, okay, we're constantly moving the body forward, we're constantly trying to shift, we're constantly trying to be something new, sink into whatever, which is beautiful. And sometimes the body just needs to feel safe in where it's at right now, and we don't need to force it into anything else. So, yeah, I'm going to see what else I had written down, because I wanted to talk about the feminine nature, primal feminine nature, learning how your inner voice talks to you. And I think that's one thing we do is as we're rushing towards what we think, where we think we want to be or where we think we should be, we forget to actually give space for the body, give space for the primal body. Like I was thinking on my way here today, I was dropping my daughter off at daycare and I was coming home and I thought, we don't often give the body time to catch up to the brain. We often will have a thought, have an aha moment, and we'll go, oh, that's what I want. I'm going to move there. And we kind of cognitively move ourselves before our body has had a chance to go, oh, I see you. Okay, that feels safe for me. Okay, let's kind of move the energy to make sure that that can come in for us so that we can move into that. So we kind of, our mind has a tendency to override our bodies and we don't really think about the bodies a lot. Like the nervous system, we don't really think about the energy, the energetics that are moving through the body. It's very just think and go, which is great, but that's a very masculine way of doing things too. Like we need to also account for the time. The body does not work as fast as the brain. The body does not move as fast as we are cognitively moving forward in the world. And we have to give the body just a sec. Sometimes it's just like a quick check-in. It doesn't have to be like days and days. Maybe it is, but a lot of the times it can just be like, it's almost like you want to inform your body of like, okay, this is where I want to go. How do we feel about this? Good? Great, let's go. But we need to like remember that the body is along for the ride, because otherwise if we don't do that and our body is not prepared and not ready to kind of, or was kind of like, oh shit, are we already here? Like how do I do that? And then it's kind of like a frantic vibe in the body and we're kind of rigid and like it's almost like an anxious way of getting there. But what if we can like take a sec for our body to just catch up, and then we sink into it softer, it's smoother, it's more fluid, it's more receptive, it's more of a organic vibe than like I'm going to do this versus I'm going to create this. So that's what the feminine energy wants to do, is it wants to create, it wants to feel, it wants to move with the rhythms of nature, it wants to be present. Whereas we've been stuck in and have grown up in this environment of think it, do it, go, and not just create. Because when we talk about creating, we're creating with something. It's like a co-creation with nature, with our body, with our environment around us. There's like a real synergy when we think about feminine energy. And if you think about like sometimes I just think about like what if our world, like what if we just sprinkle a little more femininity into it? And I'm not talking women, but I mean I guess I am talking women, but when you think about like What if the men that were in charge, for example, what if the patriarchy was just sprinkled with a little bit more softness? How do you think our world would operate? How do you think we would solve problems? How do you think we would move through the world? Because for me, when I think about that, I think, ooh, that would be softer. That would be more fluid. That would be more open. That would be a little bit more receptive. That would be a little bit more communicative. That would be a little bit more two sided. That would be a little bit more inclusive. And it just makes me think like we all need more softness. And in order for the world to access that softness that needs to be there, that is meant to be there, that is primal, that is innate, men and women. But in order for the world to access that, it's like it's our job now as this generation of women who have chosen a new path, who have essentially we're shouldering that responsibility with pride and with enjoyment and with feminine solidarity, I guess, in a way. And it's a soft allowance. And in order for the world to access that, it needs us right now to find that soft allowance within our own bodies. It's not about cognitively knowing that we need to get here. So we're going to tell other people that they need to get there. We're going to hear it in our minds. We're going to know it in our minds. And then we're going to give our body a moment to catch up. And then we're going to move from the body, which means from the self first and for the self first. We are not doing this for any sort of outcome. We're doing it because it feels good in the body. And we're moving that so it sort of filtrates into our lives. And we start to move in that way. So that means that let's say we're mothers and we're mothering children right now, or we're women and in our communities. So it doesn't have to just be mothers. We're kind of within our communities. That those actions then migrate and filter into the core of those human beings that we are raising and spending our time with because they recognize it. And it's not just like, ooh, I like what she's doing. It's like, ooh, the primal part in me recognizes this primal part in you, and I want to be what that is. That I'm longing for that. That is something I haven't had. And so, if we, as the women of today who have chosen this different path, who have chosen this route and this way of being, whether you believe that we chose it before we came here or not, in this moment, you are here because you have chosen a different path. So, all we need to do, there's no work to be done other than to let the brain or the body catch up to the mind, let the body take over so that you can just sink in, feel the safety and be like, oh no, this is okay. It can take time. It can take a moment. I don't have to get it right in every scenario. I don't have to be working towards something specific. It's not like we're doing this to see, oh, I'm going to change the world and then in 10 years this is going to look different. No. This is a primal calling within your body that you are listening to, that we are trusting, that you are trusting in some way, whatever, we don't even need to know the details, is leading towards a softer, more receptive world for our children and for the people in our lives and for ourselves. And that's all we need. We do not need the details. We do not need the certainty. We just need to operate from the body for our own bodies. This is a solo mission that just will inadvertently be an external world vision. And that, I think, is what the move towards more feminine, more divine feminine, more femininity within the world, it's really a softness, it's really a receptiveness, it's really a opportunity to return to the primal self in a way that feels good. Because we're all just trying to feel good. And somehow we're trying to do that within the confines of this very masculine type of world of like structure for work, structure for home. This is what it should look like. Structure for parenting, structure for lifestyle. And while structure is great to hold the feminine vibes, I'm going to say vibes, to hold the feminine vibes within, there's a balance between the two and your own feminine energy. It's so, you guys, what I see what I see here is that it's so repressed. It is so repressed in our bodies that it's like it doesn't even want to come out because we're afraid of what the hell might happen. Because if we let this feminine woman out, if we let this feminine nature out, it's not like she's this primal, cagey beast. She is this soft, this but powerful. She is this motherly and worldly. She is this like this version of humanity that we have not met yet. And it seems scary because we don't know what that means. We don't know what that feels like. So, how can we let her out fully? I mean, yeah, let her out little bit by little bit, whatever feels good for you. But if you can, and you can unleash this woman, when I say unleash, it sounds like she's going to like go rabid out in the world. But this energy that we collectively have is so repressed and it doesn't know what it means to be in this world. So we have to really go into the body and find that safety by sitting with the body, by moving with the body, by reconnecting to our menstrual cycle, to connecting to the rhythms of our body, to nature, to just like looking around and being like, what does my body want to be in this world? Because when that woman comes out, when that energy is allowed to come into the world, when we allow that energy back, it's almost like everything you've ever wanted will be possible and is possible. But what you've ever wanted may not be that home, that car, that travel, that everything. It might just be a sense of safety in the body, like what does the primal feminine woman, primal feminine energy want? Peace, love, fluidity, receptivity, connection. And that's going to manifest itself in different like objects and things and ways in everybody's lives. But like everything you've ever wanted will be possible. Everything you didn't even know you wanted will be possible and will be available to you once we find that safety and allow that feminine woman back out. And we see glimpses of that. This is what I'm recognizing in myself. Is I see glimpses like I have a baby and it kind of opens this up for a while. But then this world and this kind of these stories and this fear again kind of cloaks this woman back up, kind of brings her back in the body and is like, I don't know if you're safe here. Because then we fit back into the world, we fit back into that box, and we go back to work and we kind of, as best we can, fit back into that life that we had before. And I think that's part of, oh, this is so interesting. Because that's part of what this, like, what that matrescence is. It's like this woman, this primal thing has now been unlocked and is available to the world. And so then what we do is we try and take this new woman, this matrescence, this transition, and we try and fit her into, we're trying to fit her in. But what if you just didn't try so hard to fit her back in? What if that woman was allowed to like dance a little bit more? What if that woman was allowed to rest a little further? What if we allowed her to be more present in our lives? And then we move through other stages in motherhood, and again she's out again, or we move through menopause and again she comes out in a new way because she has to, because these are rites of passage as a woman, these are rites of passage as a feminine energy, and she has to come out, she's forced out because your energy shifts in that, and it's kind of like, okay, like if you're not already out, you're coming out now. But then again we learn to kind of pull that, we kind of bring her back in because we want to fit this woman back into society. And I guess that's part of just like living and wanting to be a part of a society. But what if we can let her out a little bit more, make it safe for her? And then when we make it safe for her, we make it safe for others to go, oh, I like that. But we have to be aware, first of all, and then we have to find safety in what that is. Otherwise, if she's not safe, she won't come out. Or she won't come out fully, because there's so much that we are missing in these experiences too, in pregnancy, birth, motherhood. And I talk about this a lot. There's a lot that we're missing because we don't let this energy, this femininity out as much as she wants to come out. Like if you think about pregnancy and you think about birth and you think about postpartum and you think about motherhood, and if you've been through these experiences before and these transitions and these rites of passage, then you know that there's this like inexplicable pull. And what if we could let that woman out and just let her be free, even for a bit, even a little bit. And that's why with my birth, my free birth with no, like, I didn't have anybody there. Actually, that's not true. I had one person there. She was my birth keeper, and she was really helpful, to allow me to stay in my body. But when we are constantly interrupted by the outside world, this was how it needed to happen for me. So this isn't for everyone, but for me, I needed to have no interruptions from the outside world in order to let this woman actually come out. And you guys, it was a feral experience. I was screaming and like low, like it was the most primal, animalistic experience I have ever experienced. And I know that I let that woman out. And then I spent the next 7 days naked with my baby, like sleeping and resting. And I was like, yeah, this is what a mother does. Like this is that primal energy. But then you get through that couple of weeks and then you kind of, okay, I'll have visitors, and okay, then I'll get back to life. And then, you kind of get back to life. But how can we let that woman come out a little bit more? How can we keep her there? How can we let her be safe in our everyday world? And I think the way we do that is just awareness and allowing her to be a little bit more free, talking to her, inviting her back out. Because our brain is uncomfortable with it, because it doesn't seem to fit inside the safety parameters that we see in society every day. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about like tasks of like, okay, so let's say we go to work, our kids are in daycare, we've kind of gone back to that typical life that a lot of us feel that we need to go back to in order to be normal, in order to get the things that we want, in order to live a happy life. But what if here's an example of like a primal activity or like a way to invite that woman. So if you have, let's say you're getting your period, you know that you need to rest, but you also need to go to work. But what if you just took a sick day? Isn't that what sick days are for? Take one sick day, take 2 sick days, and just rest and be in your body and let your body bleed and recognize that your body is shedding from the month before and that there's all of this happening and that you maybe want to drink some more tea and drink a lot of water. And you just take 2 days and then you go back to work. But that's an act, like that's an example of allowing the primal body to be present more often than not. And that's probably the easiest one that we can do as women, is to lean into our menstrual cycle and allow that to kind of shape some of the activities that we take part in. And the easiest one would be, okay, I'm getting my period, I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to just like relieve myself from the responsibility that I've built up in my day, in my week. Because one day, I can rest my body and feel so much more renewed than making myself go to work and dimming that primal feminine body again and asking her to not do what she is asking of me and continuing to move through the day and the world in the way that I always do. So just take this information with you. Think about how this might fit into your everyday life. Because that woman, that repressed female energy, she wants to come out. And I swear to you guys, like what is coming in the world is it's almost like we're going to go through a world transition, a world, like we're almost going to go through that matrescence where she's going to be kind of forced outward and we're not going to know what to do with her. So let's find that safety now so that when she's out there, we got this, and we can feel safe and we know that she's going to guide us and she's going to take us and we're going to have the best friggin' life because we're letting her take the lead. So if you are in this position right now, I'm sending you huge gratitude and love, and just know that you are safe. Know that you are exactly where you're meant to be, and know that this feminine energy that's within your body, this primal feminine energy, will always keep you safe. Even if it doesn't feel safe in the moment, she is there to keep you safe. She is your guiding light and she is you. So sending you all the best on this Tuesday and this bright Tuesday. I hope this wasn't too bright for you to look at. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Have a beautiful day, and we will see you again next week.